oh wait, I just lost the slide. The second question, the second bullet literally says, does it address it? So like, what if we say, where it says expand green infrastructure, why don't we just say like, expand it into places that don't have green space and plants and soil and blah, 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 like Jen was just saying.
Trying to understand how the other objectives fit together, and without getting ahead of ourselves, just trying to think of, as of the other two, how this one would complement them. So I guess the first one is to provide equitable access to nature. And the third one is to enhance resilience of water resources. So is this one more about protecting non-water resources and just the actual earth? And the first one is more about providing access to nature. I don't know if that includes parks or not.
I had interpreted it as probably nature was parks and green spaces. Maybe not clear enough for my taste quite yet, like that we don't just mean ball field, but we also can't just mean JRPS. But the way I thought about this one was maybe this is where tree wells are, and you know, berms and dividers and highways. Like maybe that's where this kind of stuff is gonna fit in a little more, and what's in those parks and green spaces and how we treat them.
Yeah, that sounds
but
good.
I do not know. I definitely don't know. That's just what I had to tell myself to grasp this.
Yeah, when I generally think about green infrastructure myself, I'm thinking about, you know, rain gardens and, and things like that. And so when I, like with that, Jen, do you remember, well, you should remember Joanne. She was with the city. She had mentioned to me that, you know, they had planted certain plants inside the planters, but because of the type of plant they didn't really do the job that was necessary. And so when I think about green infrastructure and expanding and protecting it, it's like taking into consideration all of those factors in the process.
Do we say maintain, like maintenance?
Well, that's definitely necessary.
Yeah, it's almost there because of protect, right? But in a different way, like where we might be like, don't cut the tree, not like make sure to actually take care of this investment.
So there get to be some really nitpicky terminology when you talk about preserving or protecting or conserving. At least in our realm, conserving means more about management. It understands what resources are available to you, and then having a management plan so you're deliberate about how you go about caring for it. Protecting can be similar, and protecting can have a direction that is preserving or conserving, but it really means that there's some sort of enforcer, somebody who has authority over the actions of others to make sure that harm is not made. And then the preservation really is about a do not touch kind of condition. There are exceptions to do not touch in terms of removing dead and diseased or invasive species, but it really does mean, you know, more of a less impact is better.
Parker, where did maintenance fit? I just missed it. Where did maintenance fit into those three words?
So maintenance really comes into conservation because it means that you have a plan. You can also have a maintenance plan for preservation, but it really is more limited to removals of the diseased or invasive.
Does anyone think that like the maintenance plan belongs in here? Because my fear would be that we make a great plan and then one day a tree's too big, and instead of, because we didn't maintain it the right way, it's removed and we've just done more damage than we intended to.
Clearly maintenance has to be a part of this. I found there was one of these other examples that I thought did a really good job of addressing the maintenance and bringing it as a potential kind of job creation for the green infrastructure in hiring members of the community to do the maintenance of it. And I know that the city, a lot of the green infrastructure, at least if it's funded through grants, does come with a requirement to maintain for a certain period of time. And how you then commit to that, I think is something that the city's going to have to do. I just think about the first year I was on city council, and the Alliance for the Chesapeake Bay had put these new tree wells in along 9th Street next to the Capitol, and they had just filled up with runoff, and they were no longer serving their purpose as green infrastructure. And so they do have to be maintained. So I certainly would put that in here with what we're describing.
How do we not say grass? Right? I mean, like that's
Vegetation.
well, I mean, how do we say, I guess, not grass? Like, or would you consider grass not vegetation?
Well, I think certain grasses are actually probably quite appropriate.
How do we say not turf?
Manicured.
Okay.
Non-manicured.
But do you think that would fly? Like,
I don't know. Christina, what is your thought?
I don't know. I feel like Jen and I are in so many groups and we talk about this kind of stuff. I don't know. I think that's where we say terms like native grasses instead, not, or sometimes we just say not turf lawn.
Mm-hmm.
Green, feel like sometimes we just say green space. I don't know. It's all like semantics sometimes.
I guess if somebody will have to make really nice strategies, because somebody could take a strategy and be like, aha, we will make this parking lot a field of grass that we will mow every week instead. And that doesn't, it's a little better, I guess, but it's not
Right.
what we were going for.
Right,
But I
or we'll put a golf course in.
Right. But you don't want to give people really easy, like, haha, you can win if you put in a field, because it does what's in the objective, but it's not really what would actually help.
Well, maybe then we need to like qualify it a little bit and say like something about like practices that improve water quality or use like natural processes. That's starting to get a little, I don't know, maybe we need to qualify it somehow so that you can't just put in a big lawn.
Or I would reiterate that too, and say that there's also things that can support carbon sequestration. Like there's some fantastic ways of doing prairie restoration. We used to have prairies in the Piedmont, which are mostly gone, but there are grasses that can take the carbon very deep into the soils. Just like trees. And I'm sorry, I'm going off of something that I thought was emailed to us, and this is what I'm going off of for the draft objectives, but I don't think it's what is shared. I think I just got inputs. Jen, you're on mute.
I think that those inputs are like how we got to these objectives. That,
Got it.
yeah, I think that was what was emailed. Like that's everything that we reviewed in advance is like how we led to what we're doing today.
Okay. And no, one of the other elements, and I heard this said, you know, what about heat and flooding resilience? I mean, we're somehow, I think, are those going to end up being in strategies, or do we need to be more articulate in the objective of addressing heat, addressing flooding, addressing carbon, etc.?
Kyla?
Yeah, I'm about to leave and
Okay,
go
thank you
up.
for leaving us. I wanted to say thank you. It wasn't to go away. It was a thank you.
And I'm happy to have us both here because, you know, I mean, that makes it easier. But
Well,
I have the feeling that you're going to kind of get
there's a group
out in
that's
just
missing
just a
someone.
second. There's a group waiting for you.
Yeah.
But we're
Okay.
all
Hi, everybody.
Hi.
We are on slide 23. Well, that's where it starts, but the draft objective is on slide 24. It is to expand and protect green infrastructure, which includes trees, plants, and soil. Before getting into what we like or what we can live with and what's missing, and asking the questions of whether this addresses equity, climate action, and resilience. And if the language is accessible, I would like to just go over a little bit of the information that has, or the feedback that has already been provided. One of the things that was said was that green infrastructure is something that we could not live with, and that the term green space would be preferable. That happened to be a statement that came up on multiple occasions. Some of the other suggestions in the place of green infrastructure was the living environment. Yeah, if you look at slide 25, you'll see that a lot of this is stating how much we don't like the term green infrastructure. The maintenance of green space is something that was suggested to be added into this, and the terms conserve as well as preservation. So if there's something that you like that has already been said, feel free to grab a star and place it over. And if you want to add some additional information, go ahead and drop that in the feedback section.
Do we want to discuss any pieces on this out loud?
Yeah, we
I think
definitely can have an oral discussion as well.
we could change it, but I might be in the minority when it comes to green infrastructure. It's not a term that I hear a lot, but I did kind of like hearing it. But if we have to put in parentheses to define it, then that means it's not something that should be used. But I thought it kind of made me think of green space in a different way. Because it is building on top of itself, and it's more than just an open space. It's kind of telling you that there's complexities in there. The other part that I saw kind of highlighted on the notes already, there is different value of green space too when it comes to native plants, invasive plants, and I think that does need to get called out. However we develop this conversation, I think that does need to be put in place somewhere, because we can have a lot of green space and it could be a yard, and I think that's called out too, like just a grassy lawn with a bunch of chemicals that go into it, and that's not the same value as more of a natural complex system.
Yes. That was something that was brought up in the last group as well, as far as the lawns are concerned. Frazier, go ahead.
Once again, I'm going to echo what Bryce said, in that I think, and I put this in the notes, there needs to be some intentional planning around what this green space is, including native plants. But the maintenance piece, I can't even begin to emphasize how important that is. I can give you countless examples, as anybody can in the city, I think, where, you know, somebody goes in and plants the wrong stuff and then says, oh, we've done it, and walks away. And it costs taxpayer money, it's a bad use of resources, and it defeats anybody's purpose before you begin. So when you say protect and you know, increase green space, the conversation becomes, what does the green space need to do? Is it for riparian buffer? Is it wildlife habitat? Is it community engagement? What do you want the green space to do? And I think that's really key in this objective.
Yeah, it sounds like we're really trying to get to like ecosystem function and service, as opposed to just like the aesthetic value of
Absolutely
what is green. Yeah.
Would the term natural communities to replace green infrastructure or green space be better served to address like the complex nature and the ecosystem services of the spaces that we're hoping to foster?
It doesn't feel specific enough to me.
I think it's in the right direction though.
Yeah, I think your intent is right.
The only challenge I see the challenge with having trying to avoid jargony like terms that people aren't familiar with, right? That's a challenge with using green infrastructure. The other challenge, I like it personally, right? But I totally appreciate that and would shy away from that if that becomes, as Bryce was saying, if that becomes something that is just gets in the way. The other challenge is, well, green infrastructure seems to me, I kind of alluded this in the last group, as fits within some of these other categories too, right? Like it's a proposed, I can see implementation of, you know, expanding green infrastructure as an action, or what we're doing next week. What are we doing next week? And next time, solutions.
Yeah, strategies.
For the water objective. Whereas maybe natural communities is a little bit more, it's not associated so much with a specific kind of set of solutions, that it's more open-ended and stands on its own a little bit more. Just thinking about that.
Yeah, I think this raises like the question for me of like, are there specific, and I suppose this will come up later, like are there specific objectives we're trying to get to in terms of like a water quality metric that we want to meet, and then we would need to implement specific, I don't know, wetland restoration projects to get there? Or is it more just like general we want people to have more access to green space that doesn't necessarily need to have this kind of high service quality that we would, I guess, think about in restoration, maybe ecosystem restoration.
Go ahead, Fraser.
So Wyatt, I'm going to go exactly the other direction and ask maybe a radical question. Are we better off leaving this in the green space arena so that it is broad enough rather than too specific, you know, around, and just putting some shape around intention, outcome, components, you know, materials, so that we don't lock ourselves into such a narrow definition that we don't leave ourselves any room for, you know, I think a green space is becoming, I mean, a year ago, green space meant one thing. Green space now, a year later, means a whole lot of things, but most of them are positive. And around a discussion in a community, whether it's a playground or a grassy patch or a riparian buffer, I think the general interpretation of green space is that it's proactively environmentally and community friendly.
Yeah, I think that the term, I guess, becomes a little bit more, I guess the need for specificity when it comes to green space is when we're actually looking at how, like, access to like parks and things like that, when just using green space and all those other things are encompassed in it. I think that's where it gets a little funky. But when it comes to like this in this space, I actually like the term green space because it does keep it broad and it does allow for us to take into consideration the water quality and all the other things, and really defining the intent behind the green spaces that we're protecting, you know, whether it's heat related or water quality related, human access related. I think he's right.
I'm good with green space then.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have super strong opinions, so whatever the group is thinking.
On the surface, when you look at expanding and protecting our green spaces, those are definitely things that I would agree with. I want to see more of it. I want to see it in all of our communities, not just concentrated in some of our spots. So I think overall, if we're looking for just that message, then yeah, it keeps it broad enough, and then we can start filling in the blanks, as Todd had mentioned, as kind of our sub objectives or strategies going forward. Cool.
Did you all talk about kind of the kind of explicit need to address equity issues as part of this objective? I'm trying to look at the bullet.
I feel like, and just this kind of goes to multiple points, but also to your point, Todd. Objective number 1 is says provide equitable access to nature, and I'm looking at some of the comments from that group, and they're already talking about changing that term to green space. So I wonder if, I mean, that definitely touches on, you know, providing equity, but also just makes me wonder if we're like cannibalizing or like listing 2 objectives that are potentially too similar, but just a thought.
Yeah, I was wondering how they differ. Like that is access to spaces. This is like just the space, like green spaces and the ecosystem functions that they're provided on their own. Whereas there's clear an equity issue for providing access to green spaces. But I could use a little bit more fleshed out in my head with how to bring equity into this conversation of just providing like the equity of ecosystem functioning. I mean, we want neighborhoods to have these green spaces to provide the cooling mechanisms and so forth, but that could be more addressed.
Yeah, I think that the intent behind the green spaces here is where the equity can come into play?
So I do have a question about connectivity real quick. I know we don't have a minute, but the mayor's green team has identified 5 parcels to be turned into green space. And it was they were selected based on certain criteria, equitable access being the top city owned, but in neighborhoods that were deemed marginalized and underserved. So how is that connecting, to this conversation?
Hey everybody, I don't want to break everybody up, I know, but we're going to keep going. So Kyla, I think you're going to be going to room number 1, is that right?
I'm not sure. I didn't get a notice, but I'm going to leave this breakout and see where I land.
Yeah. Well, you're in the main room now, so that's why I'm checking in on everybody.
Okay. All right.
Let me set.
Well, it just says leave meeting. It doesn't have me enough.
Yes. So I'm going to assign you to room number 1. And now you should be good.
No, I'm still
Did
here.
you get a notification? Okay, let me try again. This is why.
Hold on. Let me see. All right, I got it now.
You got it? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Hi, everybody.
Hi.
So we are on slide 25, looking at objective 2, which is to expand and protect green infrastructure, which includes trees, plants, and soil. And we want to think about what we can live with, what we like, and what is missing from here, and whether or not this addresses equity, climate action, and climate resilience. Also, we're going to take into consideration whether the language is accessible and really questioning how accessible it needs to be. Before we get started, I would like to point out that in the last couple of discussions, people said that they cannot live with the term green infrastructure. And if we have to have parentheses to define it, then the term is not accessible and should not be used. And instead, we should utilize the term green space. The term maintenance also came up as something that needed to be added into here. As well as protecting and preservation of the green spaces, and really thinking about what the intent of this green space is, especially since one of the other objectives speaks on getting access to nature, which can also be considered some form of green space. So with that, I would like you all to take a couple minutes and think about some things that you, to review this slide. And if you agree with anything, go ahead and add a star next to it. And if you have some additional comments, we are out of sticky notes, but we have a note section at the bottom of the slide where you can provide feedback as well. Then we can have a discussion.
I see a term on here I'm not familiar with. They said on the last sticky, carbon sequestration. What does that mean in layman's terms?
Yeah, so if I'm not mistaken, it's how carbon is being uptaken. But I'm not 100% sure of whether or not it's a man-made process or if it's a natural process. That's something I need to actually look into real quick. Give me one.
It can be both, actually.
Okay.
That is a good point and a distinction we would need to make. I assume in the context of this, it would be natural systems like trees and other plant systems that are carbon sinks. But yeah, you can absolutely have a man-made system that pulls carbon out of the air.
Well, I think my point makes itself there.
It does. So I agree that green infrastructure is probably not the right term to use here. Coming from my background as an engineer, that means a really specific thing, and I know it means a different specific thing to a lot of different people. I struggle with green space as a substitute because I think this objective is more about integrating these kind of natural features everywhere, whereas green space makes it seem like it needs to be a concentrated space that is set aside for nature, where what I think the objective is here is to integrate trees into every streetscape and protect the soil health and water health throughout the community, whereas green space is more of a set aside.
I think that's a great point.
So I don't know what the best alternative terminology is. I thought maybe natural systems, maybe that's also still too inaccessible of language. I don't know.
Maybe it's something along the lines like the word like integration, something that like it kind of implies the usage of both those natural systems and the man-made ones, like hybrid or something like that. I don't know the right word here, but I feel that concern. I don't really understand what green infrastructure is supposed to mean, but green spaces sounds like a park or a median on a highway to me.
Mm-hmm.
And just I probably should have asked this a long time ago when we first started, who's going to be using this document, this part right here that we're doing?
If I'm not mistaken, Kendra, would you like to jump in since you're on the call as well? But would it be just our office or would this go out into the community as well?
For evaluation or just for people to see and read?
See and read, I think, or both.
So in the engagement phase 2, so April, all of this is going to go out for evaluation, but it's only going out like in the entire frame or plan is going out instead of like individually trying to ask for feedback on objectives specifically. But people will have the opportunity to provide feedback in some capacity, but not quite as detailed as this capacity.
So people meaning whom? Who's providing that feedback?
Anyone who engages with the plan.
Okay. So the general public?
Yes, yeah. Okay. As well as stakeholders, technical experts, whoever outside of the working groups in the roundtable who engages, I guess, yeah.
If it's strictly, internal use kind of deal where it's the Office of Sustainability, I think it makes sense to use those kind of words like carbon sequestration. But like, if this is something that like the public is going to be reading, then I don't think we should be using maybe quite as technical of terminology throughout it. So when we're kind of thinking about the alternative to green infrastructure and green spaces, it probably should lean closer to the spaces side where it makes a bit more sense to the common person than something that requires a little thinking about it too hard.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of what an alternative word is to space, because I feel like that's where it makes it sound like it's a dedicated natural area.
Maybe call it an integration instead of as a verb, use it as a noun.
Like green
integration.
Yeah.
Environmental feature integration. I don't know.
I'm writing all these down. Somebody else can deal with it.
And maybe that's still not the right word, given the fact that we're also really addressing equity in this, and integration has a different implication when we're talking in terms of equity than it does when we're talking in terms of like scientific processes.
Also, I'm wondering when we speak to when the term infrastructure is used, and I agree with everything that's been said, but in terms of protecting the environment, I'm trying to figure out how to fold in holding industry accountable for doing that as well.
Well, in terms of strategies, why don't we raise taxes on places like Dominion, use that money to fund these programs, and it's a win-win all around.
All around. Well, they're getting lots of money. That's why I keep saying we need to, industry should be an integral part of this, of our discussions, but specifically where equity is concerned, because a lot of money is going to go to those industries, and they are critical to this green discussion, especially in vulnerable communities.
Maybe there's some space for some public-private cooperation on some of these efforts that would encourage small minority-owned businesses to help to meet some of these needs that could help achieve both. And I know that you've talked many times about economics being a high priority with it all, which I think makes sense. And when we're talking about those intersections between environment and business, I mean, I think that we can maybe offset some of this over to locally owned businesses.
Thank you for hearing, Carlene. Appreciate it.
I listen. It's a little less exciting being in this last one just because they've already covered everything good. We don't have much to add.
We're not plowing new ground.
That has happened in every group that I've been a part of. The last one is just a bunch of, oh, looks great.
Maggie, are you with the Office of Sustainability? What group are you with?
I'm not. So I work for an engineering firm, but then I'm also on the Green City Commission, which is sort of my closer affiliation to this.
Awesome. When we first started this exercise, I looked at the 3 statements and I was like, no, that's good. That's fine. That's fine. It's very simple. That works.
Yeah, if you give us long enough, we can pick apart anything.
True. This is why bureaucracy takes so long. Because was nice working with you guys today.
You too.
Yes. 54 seconds. See you later. Thank you, everybody.
"26 seconds. Oh, I see. No, y'all are in our room. Go away. We're not done yet. We got 26 seconds left. Well, no, 11. Never mind.
You want me to go away for 11 minutes or 11 seconds?
It's too late now.
All right, welcome back, everyone. Thank you so much for participating in our breakout room activity. I hope that went well. I'm really enjoying seeing all the comments and looking forward / also not looking forward to bringing everything together so that we can continue talking about this at our next meeting. Parker, yes, you're still here. I just wanted to note, you mentioned air quality as being so I just wanted to make sure that you had finished that thought. I'm gonna put that in our notes. Okay, great. While I am bringing back up the slides, does anyone have any general reflections or anything you'd like to share before we move on to our wrap up activity? And if not, no problem. We have one more question for you before we finish up. So this is something that we have been thinking about throughout the planning process for RVAgreen 2050 so far. And we've, this has come up naturally in our discussions, which is that even though we have these nice 5 working groups and our other groups of stakeholders who are involved in RVAgreen 2050, and we're going to be going along this process of drafting content within these 5 areas, we know there's overlap between, we talked about earlier today, buildings and energy might address something that also relates to the natural environment and some of the objectives that you all might have talked about today. So what we wanted to ask you all is if you have any ideas either now or you can share them with us later on how we could potentially better facilitate, especially in this virtual environment, collaboration across working groups. We as staff are attending all of the working group meetings, obviously, and so we will be bringing ideas back and forth as they come up and saying, oh, well, the transportation group talked about this thing that might actually fit under the environment group objective number 2 or something like that. We will be doing that all along. We also wanted to note that the meetings for the other working groups, if anyone is interested, are open to all. And I've shown on here the ones that are coming up next week where the groups will start talking about strategy level content. In case anyone is interested, you can pop in and out. You don't have to be there for the whole 2 hours. If anyone has been involved in, another planning process where they've seen, other ideas work, we would love to hear, or any other thoughts that you all have right now.
Brianne, I'd be interested, sorry, Rob.
Go, Meg.
Just to see the lists of who's in those groups.
Yeah.
A lot of that, there may be some informal collaboration when folks know people.
That's a great idea, and that's all in like our Google Drive, so I can just share those links really easily with everybody.
And then just from the equitable access side, two pieces on transportation and buildings. And I mean, one of the questions that came up is why does green space have to be other than what we're building? And why aren't we building green space in as we go? And then the other is sort of transportation and connectivity of making spaces accessible. And it seems like those were 2 places where there might be significant overlap between our group and those 2.
Rob, I'm sorry, can you say the second one again, just so I make sure I have that thought down?
Connectivity and so Parker, again, right? You can't move the James River. It's there, it's a thing. It's one of our prime, ecological assets. how do you make it accessible to folks? There's a transportation piece there potentially, there's a greenway piece there potentially, there's a multimodal aspect, right? So that thing.
Got it. Perfect. Thank you.
And Rob, we also talked about how, thinking about like the 10-minute walk thing, how if there is a green space in your neighborhood, how to make it safe for everyone in the neighborhood to access it. So on a different scale than the JRPS.
Awesome.
I'm not sure how anybody else would feel about this, but I know that if there were a very simple recap of what happened at the other meetings and maybe posted on the RVAgreen 2050 site where I can like just run through before this meeting, kind of see in simple bullet point format what was discussed at the other meetings, maybe any key takeaways. And if y'all want to put links to things like slides so we could really see them. I know personally, I have a very busy schedule, so even popping in and out of a 2-hour-long meeting doesn't seem quite as attainable as telling Siri to read me this page while I am doing my makeup or something. And I think I can't be the only one who wants something simple and fast as an alternative to full-on engagement, so that I can be fully engaged in this one and not trying to stress myself too thin over multiple different areas.
Definitely heard. And yes, this is actually something that will work really well for the next couple the next 2 meetings that we have scheduled before our April engagement period. We'll be compiling after today, actually, the list of draft objectives from all of the groups. So this is going to be about 20 or so sentences, just like what you read today. We'll definitely share that with everybody so you can see kind of where the groups are starting from. And then whatever platform we develop for, the actual drafting of the strategies will be shareable across all groups. It's going to be a lot, we know, but Carlene, I think that's a great idea, and we will do as much as we can to make all of that accessible to everybody.
If you'd like to follow up with me after the meeting, I might have some ideas for simplifying that process in terms of like actual execution. Just shoot me an email and we can talk about it.
I'm going to do that. Highlighting your name in my notes. All right, so I do want to wrap us up. Please feel free to share any additional thoughts with us as you think about the process and what we've done and all of that. Just to wrap up, your homework is to go back to any of these slides if you'd like and add any additional feedback. This is not the last time we're going to be asking for your feedback on the objectives. We'll be revising internally and then coming back to you probably before our next meeting, where we will be then also thinking about more specifically what strategies can help us achieve these objectives. For this group, our next meeting is in 2 weeks on February 22nd. I'm going to put into the chat our quick feedback survey. Feel free to take it now to let us know how today's meeting went. The feedback we get is always super helpful. The other thing that we wanted to leave a minute open for is anyone who would like to share anything about like an upcoming event or anything related to like your organization or neighborhood. I just put into the chat something from Wafa May. She shared that the Governor's Summit on Equitable Collaboration is later this month. If you haven't heard of it, please click the link and check it out. I think it's going to have a lot of overlap with what we've talked about so far in our process. So any other updates, upcoming events, or resources that folks want to share before we sign off? Fraser?
Capitol Trees is having a community work day to weed, prune, trim, get the garden, the low line in good shape for end of winter. It's on February 20th, Saturday from 10 to noon. If anybody wants to come, that'd be great.
Awesome, thank you.
This is Parker. I'd just say 2 things. One, Capital Region Land Conservancy is hiring for a land conservation specialist. So if anybody knows somebody looking for a position in land conservation, please look at our website or our Facebook page. They can email me. The deadline to apply is, I want to say, February 21st. And then also, I believe it begins at the end of this week, but the RVA Environmental Film Festival will also be running, and they're going to be doing it virtually. So it's a great opportunity to share some content and some incredible visual stories.
Perfect. Thanks, Parker. Anyone else? I'll share all these in my follow-up email too, so everybody has links and dates. Well, it's 3 o'clock, so thank you all so much for sticking with it today. We really appreciate all of your feedback and hope that this was as productive for you all as it was for us. We will see you in 2 weeks, and feel free to reach out to us in the meantime with any thoughts or questions that you have. So thank you so much. Bye, everybody.
I have a good one.
Thank you.
Have a good one. Take care.
My screen is weird. All right, so Alicia was supposed to be coming back. Let me stop. Hold on. Okay, so recording is stopped. Alicia said she was coming back.
The recording has not stopped.
Yeah, mine is still running.
So I can't stop the